As we begin our run of the top 200 episodes of live-action Star Trek, many of our entries today deal with aging or feeling obsolete. Thanks for joining me on Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Going to the source at number 200, Uranium Fever, or The Shipment. Archer goes on a tip where the power behind the weapon being built to destroy Earth, chemocyte, is being refined. He takes the lead scientist hostage and learns of a 100-year war that destroyed the Xindi homeworld, and that the general Xindi society doesn't know what's going on with the destruction of Earth. Archer even gains a friend despite kidnapping and gets a way to track the chemocyte to the actual weapon being built. Trip and Phlox mess around with a reptilian weapon and show why you use an abandoned asteroid somewhere as they trigger a self-destruct feature. This is where the Xindi arc truly starts hitting its stride. Learning Borg rituals at 199, Extreme Truth, or Absolute Candor. Picard's fourth episode, in the slowest building season of Trek ever, won an Emmy for makeup, and that does help, considering Soji and Narek's extreme sock sliding around Borg hallways in this Jonathan Frakes directed episode. We see through flashbacks that Picard had a good thing going a decade and a half before resettling Romulans, but in that time has gone from hero to zero in their eyes when Starfleet pulled out of the resettlement efforts. As he goes back to Vashti to enlist the help of a Romulan warrior nun, it seems as if Picard is given a second chance at an adopted Romulan son figure. But this episode's ending with Elnor saving Jean-Luc's life is the most useful thing Elnor will ever get to do, before being completely forgotten by the end of this season. Despite the nitpicks, the episode is very satisfying to watch, has a good Star Trek message as Picard challenges a Romulan-only cafe, and we get into space aboard the La Sirena. Trading up at 198, Of the Heart, or Treachery, Faith, and the Great River. We're dropped into Odo giving Kira an amazing-looking back rub. He's called to meet with a once-thought-dead Shadow Master, Gul Rousseau, and it turns out to be a ruse from a Weyoun clone looking to defect. Odo spends the rest of the episode trying to get him back to the Federation before his successor and Damar have Dominion ships destroy them, behind the back of the female founder. Odo learns what faith really is and what it feels like to be a god giving his favored children last rites, when this Weyoun triggers his kill implant to save the life of Odo. Back on the station, Nog shows us the faith of Ferengi society in the Great Material River, as he continually trades up to keep O'Brien's reputation as a miracle worker alive. There's some great moments where you think he's going to drown Miles in the choppy waters, but in the end makes everyone happier than they thought they could be after just a pinch of panic. Number 197 has an air of distrust in Allegiances, or For the Cause. Turns out Sisko's love interest Cassidy Yates has been smuggling goods to the Maquis and sending him on a wild goose chase to find out that it's just the distraction for Eddington to expose himself as a major player in the organization and stealing industrial replicators meant for Cardassia. Garrick starts taking notice of Gul Dukat's daughter, Zial, and in the end basks in the heat as lizard people do. The plot is really straightforward, but an absolute pleasure to watch, and sets up the heyday of the Maquis right before it all comes crashing down. It says a lot about Ben that he's willing to send his girlfriend to prison, but wait for her and keep her quarters fresh. Dealing with deep emotions at 196, Head On, or The Forgotten. In that one where Seth Farland got a cameo, Archer gives what's left of the crew the "It's been a long road" speech because things are looking pretty bleak. And in between 48 hours without sleep for Trip, he's asked to write the "Sorry, your daughter isn't coming home" letter for a member of his team. It forces him to look at the fixation around his sister that he lost during the first Xindi attack, and allows him some measure of peace in the end through a process that makes Florida Man anxious. T'Pol's facing her own demons in Trellium addiction and really shows that she's falling apart, as the ship around her is in shambles as well. As Degra deals with his doubts about building the weapon, he and Trip cross paths, and there's this humanizing moment for both men. There's a lot of pieces that pull on your heartstrings in this one. Becoming obsolete at 195, Ultimate Logic Loop, or the Ultimate Computer. We get a look at a Commodore that doesn't completely suck in Commodore Wesley, who orders Kirk to take Richard Daystrom on board for a war game and tests a new Starship AI that could make Kirk and company obsolete. The early version of Badgie proves, like every computer we see gain the ultimate power and sentience in the franchise, kills crew members that try to unplug it, destroys unmanned ships, and kills a few dozen Starfleet officers when it stops treating these war games as an exercise. The M5 computer is the most interesting of all the computers. Kirk proves a propensity for talking into logic loops, and introducing the namesake to the often-mentioned Daystrom Institute makes for a very satisfying episode of TOS. Like others in this block, the episode is also about aging out of the usefulness of starship captains, and bringing up the idea of a Captain Dunsel. But Commodore Short-Sighted got the short end of M5's wrath, bringing back an old-school Trek character at 194, Dignified Aging, or Sarek. At a time when Gene Roddenberry didn't want any real mention of the original Enterprise and its shenanigans, the new showrunners brought back Spock's father, Sarek, in one final ambassador role, despite his clear problems due to aging. When a rare Vulcan aging disorder causes him to lose his emotional control, the effects are felt by the crew, and it turns minor issues into emotionally charged fights. Jean-Luc setting Sarek up to realize his controls are slipping is an amazing acting moment for Mark Leonard, as is the chance for Patrick Stewart to Patrick Stewart after a mind meld to help Sarek to gain some measure of the captain's control, and leaves Picard an emotional wreck. This is an amazing episode of emotional outbursts and a question about how to treat aging in a dignified manner, and cements these two characters in a way even Spock could never appreciate his own father in life. Trying to make things right at 193, Atonement, or Jatrell. I know some don't view this as a good episode of Trek, but hear me out. The end seems really ridiculous, and the fact that the scientist theory doesn't pay off aren't really the point. I'd argue that this is Voyager's first really good standalone episode in its first season, as Neelix confronts the creator of the weapon that destroyed the moon that he lived on and killed his family. Jatrell comes under false pretenses of checking on Neelix for a deadly disease, just so he can covertly gain access to the ship's transporters, and try to put back together fragments of DNA from the cloud into living Talaxians. Even though it doesn't work, it shows the man isn't a monster, and that Neelix is capable of change and growth. Disappearing into your own little world at 192, oh, all right. Or, remember me? Beverly Crusher's got a whole shoebox full of them dangly ones. Here's another one many fans discount, but I think it's an amazing sci-fi story coupled with a fear of getting older, as one of Bev's literal oldest friends comes on board, and her son's messing around with cosmic-level warp bubble theory that accidentally engulfs his mom, Bev's world getting literally smaller and smaller, until she's just arguing with Majel about the nature of a collapsing universe, is great, and is one of just a few moments where Gates McFadden gets to shine in a truly interesting sci-fi plot. The The Traveler makes his mid-run of the show appearance to check in on the future Traveler Wesley Crusher and help pull his mother out of the silly math of the universe gone wrong shenanigans.
Ah, computer! That program is available.
Thanks, Major. Thanks, Major.
Antimatter containment positive. Warp drive within normal parameters.
Thanks, Major.
There is no Dr. Dalen Quace aboard the Enterprise. There is no Dr. Dalen Quace aboard the Enterprise.
Thanks, Major.
There is no Dr. Hill or Dr. Solar aboard the Enterprise.
Thanks, Major.
Blood pressure 122/70.
Thanks, Major.
That is not a valid question. To explore the galaxy.
Thanks, Major.
123 days.
Major.
The universe is a spheroid region 705 meters in diameter.
Thanks, Major.
A flaw in the ship's design. 3 minutes 30 seconds to life support failure.
Thanks, Major.
A dynamic atmospheric disturbance of great intensity.
Thanks, Major.
Failure in turboshaft 4.
Thanks, Major.